This is Your Superior Self, episode 51, How to Do What You Love, with Dr. Richard Shuster.
I'm literally just a sitting duck in this intersection. And so from the time that the car hits me and my airbag goes off and I'm sent into oncoming traffic, and then I ultimately crash into a telephone pole, which is what broke my stopped my momentum, a few seconds, and literally I'm having this lengthy conversation with myself. And prior to this moment in my life, I really I'm ashamed of who I was. I mean, I was really kind of a jerk. I was very focused on money for the sake of having money. There's nothing wrong with, and I know this, of course, resonates with people who listen to your show, that everybody's trying to elevate themselves, elevate their careers, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're all trying to do that. But I wanted stuff for the sake of having stuff.
What is going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to your favorite podcast, Your Superior Self. I'm your host, Trey Downs, blue-collar worker turned into blue-collar entrepreneur. And today I'm excited to have for you on the show Dr. Richard Shuster. He is the host of the Daily Helping podcast, along with the founder of the nonprofit Every Kid Rocks. And before I get to the very meaningful and powerful interview with Dr. Shuster, I wanted to read for you an excerpt from the book Perfectly Yourself by Matthew Kelly. And in his book, Matthew says, rigorous honesty and love of truth in turn give birth to integrity. Honesty means that we can be taken at our word and that what we say can be trusted. Integrity means that we can be relied on to do what we say we will do. Together, honesty and integrity make us worthy of trust. Trustworthy. As George Washington once said, I hope I shall always possess firmness and virtue enough to maintain what I consider the most invaluable of all titles, the character of the honest man. Matt goes on to say, but honesty is no easy feat today. It seems that we celebrate an honesty of convenience in which a certain amount of lying and deception is deemed necessary. We are honest when it doesn't cost us anything, but the moment we are called on to sacrifice something to be honest, we abandon this virtue. And the reason why I chose honesty is because we have to use that virtue when we self-reflect, which is what I really want to talk about today. True self-reflection is the inward dive into oneself and accepting what you see and working on the good and the bad and not masking the bad. People tend to look into oneself and just focus on the good, and you can't do that. I've done that for forever. Last week's episode, when Adam talked about that and talked about how he self-reflects and he accepts the bad that comes along with the good, and I was like, how many people do this? How many people mask the bad and don't even realize that there's bad in there because they've been masking it for so long? And I've done that. I know that I'm a selfish person, and it hinders me. It hinders me as a father, as a husband, as an individual. And I have to take that mask off, and I have to start working towards that. I have a ton of good, and I have a laundry list of bad that for years and years I just ignored, and I haven't put in the work to work on those. And I need to start realizing that to be fully complete, I need to work on the bad, and that's what I'm going to start doing. And I'm hoping that this helps you and makes you realize that you have to do the same. And the hardest part about self-reflection is putting in an action plan to help you grow as a person on a daily basis. I think step one for me is being more conscious to the fact that I am selfish, and it's going to affect me on a daily basis in terms of decisions that I make, in the way that I parent, in the way that I'm a husband, because I tend to put my feelings or my needs first. And I need to take a step back and detach from whatever situation's going on at the time and say, hey, look, this is the way that you are. There's no changing that. You just need to recognize that and work on that and say, hey, look, is this outcome going to benefit me, or is it going to benefit everyone as a whole? And that's step one, is to realize that in the moment of your daily routine that you tend to be a certain way, and you can't change that, but you can work on it. And to help us develop our action plans for ourselves, I have for you on the show today Dr. Richard Shuster. He's a licensed clinical psychologist. He is the host of the Daily Helping with Dr. Richard Shuster podcast. On his podcast, Dr. Shuster interviews world-renowned thought leaders and influencers who educate and inspire through their stories, expertise, and passion for helping make a difference in the lives of others. Dr. Shuster's mission is to help people become the best version of themselves and as a result, make the world a better place. And in this week's moment of gratitude, I want to say thank you to all the founders of nonprofits that are doing good deeds in this world. If you have an organization that is doing great things, I want to know about it. I want to know how we connect with you and how we can help your organization. I also want to say thank you to you, the listener. I want to say thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to listen to what I have to say and support the podcast. If this is your first time listening, please leave a rating and a review and hit the subscribe button. And without further ado, here is my interview with Dr. Richard Shuster. Hey, what's up, Superior Nation? Welcome back to Your Superior Self. Today, I am joined with Dr. Richard Shuster. Dr. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Trey. It's great to be here.
So, for my listeners who haven't heard of you yet, give us like a quick bio on what you're up to today.
So what I'm up to today is everything that I love and nothing that I don't, and that took work getting there. My background is that I am a psychologist, but long before I was a psychologist, I was working in IT. And so I was a network guy. I used to be the guy who would, back in the day, I'd be pulling cables and crawling through ceiling tiles, fixing computer hard drives and things like that. And I eventually started my own tech company. I actually was hanging out with a couple of buddies, and we bid on a contract for the military. We won, which was like, I don't know if you remember that UPS commercial back in the day where these guys started their first online web store and they got an online order and they got excited. And then they saw like hundreds of orders coming in and like, holy crap, what do I do? So that was kind of what it was like. And we, I was living in Atlanta at the time. And when I won this contract, it was to help secure all the medical records for the whole U.S. Army, which was pretty wild. And so I wound up getting ready to relocate to San Antonio. And as we're getting this off the ground on what was an otherwise ordinary Saturday of watching football and hanging out with friends, I was in a pretty horrific car accident in which I broke my spine and I almost died. What's really interesting about the brain, and I won't get overly nerdy and technical, but we have this mechanism that when the brain perceives we're in real danger, it slows things down. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows, letters from soldiers dating back, well before World War II. I mean, we're talking like 100 plus years of this data where people who perceive themselves as about to die see time kind of slowing down, almost like the Matrix. If you think of Neo, like moving around and bullets are whizzing by him. So I've got this 3-second window maybe upon which I'm turning left into an intersection. And then I realize that this silver BMW is flying at me at full speed. And I know that I'm dead. I mean, it's just, I'm literally just a sitting duck in this intersection. And so from the time that the car hits me and my airbag goes off and I'm sent into oncoming traffic, and then I ultimately crash into a telephone pole, which is what stopped my momentum, few seconds. And literally I'm having this lengthy conversation with myself. And prior to this moment in my life, I really, I'm ashamed of who I was. I mean, I was really kind of a jerk. I was very focused on money for the sake of having money. There's nothing wrong with, and I know this, of course, resonates with people who listen to your show, that everybody's trying to elevate themselves, elevate their careers, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're all trying to do that. But I wanted stuff for the sake of having stuff. Fast cars. I look at these boats online, and I was going to have a boat just for the sake of having a boat. And so as I'm sitting here and my car is just being crushed like an empty pop or soda can, depending on what country or what part of the country you ascribe to, I'm sitting there having this conversation with myself. And my first thought was, my parents are about to get this call from the police that I'm dead. And that really filled me with a tremendous sense of shame, guilt. And then my next thought was this kind of reflection on what I've accomplished in my life and what do I have to be proud of. And the answer was not much. What's the expression? You can't take it with you. Like, that's really true, right? And so it wasn't one of these, a Christmas Carol moments, Ghost of Christmas Future, where I'm saying, oh, dear Lord, if you let me live, I'll start giving, presents to orphan boys and girls. Like, it wasn't like that. I knew that my life was over. I was convinced it was. And so, the way that I hit that telephone pole, it was exactly in the right spot. Like a little bit further down the driver's side door, it would have crushed me on that side. And I broke my back. I suffered pretty severe injuries internally. My neck was pretty messed up as well. And so, I was laid out for a while. And I ended up ultimately going back to work. And I go back to this company. And it was kind of like nothing was really ever the same for me again. I mean, it was the same work, same people, but I just didn't feel it. And so I just started feeling worse and worse because, I'm sticking it out because there's so many people that I told I was going to do this and that I didn't want to let down. And I think I was really afraid of letting them down. But so I'm just working at this job that was making me more miserable by the day until ultimately I gained the courage to walk away from it.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I know, well, my experience wasn't so much a car accident and a near-death experience, but I think a lot of my listeners and I can relate to the fact that we at some point lose that fulfillment in our careers. So like when you come back to your job, how much time elapsed before you felt like this isn't what I was meant to do?
It was almost right away. It was like I got back there and I'm sitting at this desk and I'm just staring at the wall. Like, we had this little office and it was like in this industrial park where all these buildings were like those prefabbed steel or aluminum. I don't know what they were, those big metal buildings. And so it was not a fancy office and it didn't need to be for the work we were doing. But I was just sitting there staring and like, there's got to be something more than this. And I think that was probably, the longest period of time that I was really dishonest with myself and just kind of rationalizing it in every way that I could. But I mean, just the more that I was there, the longer that I was there, the more miserable I became. I mean, I actually became physically ill and I kept going to the doctors and the doctors were like, we don't know what's wrong with you. And, it's funny, like, you don't have to be a psychologist to know, well, I was depressed. Like, I was just not happy with where I was.
Man, that's powerful. That's interesting. Like, I feel like a lot of people are like that, walking around depressed, but they don't have the courage to go out and change that, right? Like, what gave you that courage to go out and find what fulfilled you?
It wasn't even so much that I knew what I was going to do next. I was terrified. I mean, I just knew that I was making myself physically ill staying in this role. And at this point, I was just done. And I was working 80 plus hours a week, miserable. And I just walked in one day and there wasn't like, I received a sign from the universe or anything. I just had enough. And I walked in and I said, I'm out, I'm done. I quit. And I just went back to my little 1-bedroom apartment where I was hanging out, and I had some money. So it wasn't like I had this, sense of urgency tomorrow that, it wasn't like a Tony Stark military contract. Like, it wasn't anything like that. I mean, I wasn't flush with cash, but I had enough cash reserves where I could hang out and kind of figure some stuff out for a little bit. And so, one day I went to the grocery store and this was after, maybe 3 weeks, a month. I don't know. Might have even been more than that. Of just kind of like lamenting, like, man, like I spent all this time getting this IT, expertise and certifications and time and money and what a waste and feeling pretty sorry for myself. And I'm at a grocery store and I hear these two moms talking about MySpace.com. For those of you old enough to remember, before Facebook, it was MySpace.com. And one of their teenage daughters had posted like a picture of them chucking a deuce wearing a bikini or something like that. And so they're talking about this. And, my background is network security. Like, that's kind of the stuff that I was doing. So I just said, hey, I couldn't help it over here. And I gave them just a few pointers on kind of keeping their computers safe. And this was in a pre-smartphone era, so it was all about the computers back then. And so their eyes got real big, and one of them was on the PTO at their school, and I said, hey, can you come talk to our PTO and do an internet safety, little seminar? And I'm like, well, let me check my schedule, right? And so I go with no expectations, but I'd been sitting around doing nothing, and so I go, and I really enjoyed that. I felt I didn't charge anything. I just went and I spoke, and it was really cool to be in that position, because what it did for me was it did something called in psychology we have a term called cognitive reframing, which is essentially you take a piece of information and you view it from a different perspective. So all of a sudden, I was able to flip something inside me to where I was lamenting and I was down on myself for having wasted all this time learning this IT knowledge. All of a sudden, it didn't feel so useless anymore. And it also felt good for me because I was just selflessly helping people kind of give that knowledge away, which was really cool. And so somebody comes up to me in the audience who was a police officer in the city's cybercrime unit. Now, Lord knows why those two ladies didn't ask that guy to give this speech, but he came up to me and he said, you're really good. You know a lot of stuff. And as a civilian, you can say some things that as a police officer, I really can't. And so, we're putting a program together. Would you come on a speaking tour with us? Well, how about that? Now, all of a sudden, I'm starting to travel around and I'm speaking to schools about internet safety and created this little kind of niche for myself and did a couple, radio interviews. And back then, podcasting, isn't quite what it was, or it's not what it is now. It was very different. But I did a couple shows and it felt cool. And again, like, pushing me closer towards finding that purpose. And at one of these speaking events at another school, somebody who was a school administrator asked me to mentor a kid, that they had a lot of female mentors but no male mentors, like a big brother, big sister kind of thing, which is really like pretend therapy, right? It's not, but you get to be this change element in this kid's life. And so that was really kind of the light bulb where I put it all together and then went back to graduate school and got a master's and then got my doctorate in clinical psychology. And so all of a sudden now, where I had no purpose, only that I knew that what I had doing was making me miserable, I now had a new path. And so it kind of evolved on its own, or, depending on how you view things, it evolved for me because I was supposed to walk down that path. However you choose to look at it, it wouldn't have happened had I not kind of taken that leap of faith to get out of what was making me miserable. And then, thank goodness for me that I was in the right aisle at the grocery store at the right time. And that kind of sent me down the direction I'm on today.
Mm-hmm. It's so crazy to me. Like, you take that leap of faith, but all the opportunities that presented them, themselves to you in that course of, what you're trying to grow, you go to the grocery store, you go do a talk. Now you have a police officer approaching you about doing some touring, maybe, radio interviews. Like, I feel like the free opportunities, like when somebody asks you to do something, I can't pay you, but I need you to come. Can you do this for me? I think those are the best kind because you're helping them out. So you're providing them a service. And in the same sense, you don't know who they know or what's going to happen that could eventually help you out.
I mean, there's certainly something to that. And, I speak a lot when I go on people's programs about the science of that and altruism in general. I do believe, look, if you have a skill set that you're good at, certainly it feels good to give it away. It feels better to earn a living doing it, obviously. Like if we can do what we love and get paid well to do it, that's kind of the tops, right? Because then we have sustainable income, we have the time freedom to spend with our families. Like that's the best. But just being in a place, regardless of what you're doing, if you find a way to incorporate helping others into your routine, your world will change dramatically. It's very easy to fall into a scarcity mindset, particularly if you've been there for a while or you grew up with it and, money was an issue in the home where you grew up in. those are patterns that carry over often generation to generation without us even knowing it. And so, the brain is very interesting in that what it's really trying to do, as complex as the brain is, the simplest way that I describe the brain to people is it really just has one goal, and that's to keep us safe. And safe means familiar, and familiar means status quo. So your brain systems are designed to keep things exactly the way they are. So if you're in a state where you're kind of perpetually just going through the motions, floating through life kind of aimlessly, your brain's going to work really hard to keep you there, because that's your baseline, that's your homeostasis. And so, part of what's awesome about this space that, shows like yours that really help people rise up is that what you're really doing is you're starting to rewire your brain and create new neural pathways that are often created when we form new habits, when we surround ourselves with different people. And so, there's also this physiological component. And so what people don't realize, and it's something that I'm trying to bring awareness to, is that whether we receive assistance or whether we help others, the same biological mechanisms, the same structures in our brain light up. If I gave you $1,000 today and you were to randomly give it to somebody else, and we hooked up the brains to real-time diagnostic imaging, they look the same. And so in this era of incredible narcissism and selfishness, and we're a Facebook, Instagram selfie generation where we're focused on presenting how awesome we are to the world, why not help other people? Because if you start doing these things, even little things, but notice it, you will feel better. And so that's something that I used to tell my patients, is that who would talk to me about their having depression, go do something nice. Go smile at somebody. Force yourself to smile at somebody. Open the door for somebody. I will occasionally, buy groceries for the person in line behind me at the store, or, stuff like that, or buy somebody's gas. And it doesn't even have to be a monetary thing. But when we shift our focus towards, doing things that are selfless, there is a psychological and a physiological benefit to doing so.
I love your quote that you say when you're on Entrepreneurs on Fire. You say, to really win, you must focus on others. And that hits me so hard, because no one ever thinks about that. They always think about, what do I need to do next? I'm a big believer in you reap what you sow. And if you're just going through a tough time, things aren't really happening for you, and it just seems like you can't get your head above water, start giving more service, start doing more things for more people, and I promise you, it will come around to you.
It absolutely will. And, one of the things that I often hear from people when I say this, the first objection that I get is, well, I can't afford that. And again, as I said, it doesn't have to be a monetary thing. The second objection that I get is, well, I'm trying to start a business. I'm working 2 jobs, going to school, whatever. Schedule it. You schedule it like you schedule your oil change. You schedule it like you schedule getting up in the morning. And the best way to commit to something like this is do something you like. So, if you're an animal person, then volunteer at a pet shelter. If you like cooking, then volunteer to go help, feed the homeless, or work at a soup kitchen or something. Do something that's in line with things that you like. And I promise you, there are volunteer opportunities within your community. And then, the other piece that comes with that is that if you are a solopreneur or working on a side hustle and you're out in the community doing things to help others, what better way to get your name out there than doing things like that, starting local.
You also mentioned before on one of the shows about your, I guess, biggest failure, or a failure that helped you get to your success today. And it was a story about getting involved with some entrepreneurs that really you probably shouldn't have. Your gut was saying something else, and you went ahead and did it anyway. Like, what was that story? I mean,
yeah, that was the story about this government contract. I mean, I said that there were those 2 guys that I bid on the deal with. They're not. I don't think they were bad guys. And I mean, if I ran into them today, I would certainly be friendly to them, and I don't think that they'd like take a punch at my face or anything, but they were not the right people for me. And so the lesson that I learned from that was, I had no capital at the time. Like there was no money really that initially went into this. It was like we won the deal and then we figured it out. And so if I had to do that all over again, where I wanted it to be more successful with the benefit of hindsight, probably what I would have done was gone and gotten some capital and hired the people to do these other roles, because the roles were distinguished in that one guy had this set of skill sets and I certainly didn't have those skills, and another guy had another complementary set of skills. And so while the skills were complementary on paper, the personalities were just not. They just were not right. And so because of the lure of the money, because of the not having the cash and the fear of going out and getting that capital, I partnered up with some people that, it was really, I mean, even if I hadn't had my accident, it was probably doomed to fail from go, just because it was the wrong mix of personalities. And if you are forming a partnership, if the personalities don't work, you're dead. I mean, it just won't work.
What do you think, like, the other personalities should have been for you? Like, what have complemented, what other personalities complement you?
I mean, everybody's very different. I think, and again, what's also interesting is that who I was when I started that company was not who I was when I left it. But there were essentially two alpha dogs, and that was tough. And you had you had two alphas, and then you had one person who wasn't even really fully committed to it, because he and I get it, he had a wife and kids and he was commuting, and it made it very difficult just to even engage. I don't think he was really fully engaged. So I think now with the knowledge of a psychologist, I think it's the kind of thing where you sit down and say, well, who has the leadership skills, who has, the organizational skills, and you really kind of fit those pieces together.
No, I agree 100%, because I think you need to have the operator, you have to have the analytical thinker, and then you have to have that networking guy or girl or something, and they all have to complement each other. You're 100% right. If you have two alpha dogs, it's kind of hard to like be a decision maker when they both are kind of fighting over that territory.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ventures I'm involved in now is I have a psychological assessment company which I've created, and I mentioned this to you a bit before we started recording. And I'm the CEO of this organization, but our chief product officer, who's my partner, it's the most perfect complementary pairing that I've ever had professionally. It's amazing because we absolutely understand our roles very clearly, and he has a set of skill sets that I will just never have, and vice versa. And so it works really well together, and we've had tremendous synergy. And I think that's important. And I think, if you're starting a partnership, you really need to be honest with yourself and your prospective partner. And there's tools, there's things that I just didn't know about, but there's tools and assessment instruments and all sorts of things you could do to kind of figure that out these days. But, you have to just be very honest with yourself, and it can't just be about the money. A partnership just can't be, hey, I can make 500, widgets by myself, and you can make 500 more, and then we'll have 1,000 widgets. It's got to be much more symmetric and complementary than that.
Do you think more people are waking up to the fact that if they work hard enough or they start improving themselves, they're capable of anything?
I think we're in a very interesting era where, personal development isn't just it used to almost be like it had this little cult following. Tony Robbins was the guy, and then before him, Zig Ziglar and all these people were out there. But it was a very small set of people who did it. Certainly salespeople, of course. But then you just had it was very niche. It wasn't nearly as mainstream as it is today. And the internet has transformed that. I mean, obviously, not only in terms of reach, but in terms of the type of content that you can directly deliver to somebody. One of the things that's very interesting is that I've seen just in talking to people and my own kind of anecdotal research, nothing clinical. But what I've seen is that there seems to be a greater acceptance, and certainly, even in those that, maybe are more a bit blue collar, that personal development's okay. It's not a weakness. Like they're used to, like the tough guy thing doesn't fit, as much as it used to. People like Fortune 500 CEOs, an overwhelming percentage of them, and I don't remember the exact statistic, but I recently saw this. The overwhelming majority of them carve out time in their morning every single day to meditate. And maybe 15 years ago, that would have been viewed as, weak and soft and, some worse, probably harsher terms than that. But now it's accepted because we understand what the benefits are to the brain. We understand how meditating is an example, but meditating can make us handle stress better. It can make us healthier. We are better in our relationships. We're better dads. We're better spouses. There's just huge benefits to it. And so I think this is the same thing with the personal development and wellness industry overall. I mean, it's growing like crazy, and podcasting, of course, is a large part of that. There's 500,000 podcasts, and quite a few of them are in this personal development space. So I think that the science has caught up in a lot of ways. I mean, we're able to do things with the brain scans that we weren't able to do 20 years ago. So we're able to quantify a lot of stuff. Like, so for example, pretty much, I don't know if it's popped up on your show, so if it hasn't, I'm excited to be the first. But like every personal development podcast at one point or another talks about the quote by Jim Rohn, right? You're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. Well, people have been saying that for 100 years. Before it was Jim Rohn, Dale Carnegie was saying it. And before Dale Carnegie was saying it, was Napoleon Hill, and it was the Rockefellers, and you're going back into the 1800s. And so, but here's what science has taught us. Science has taught us we have these little things in our brains called mirror neurons, and the mirror neurons exist for one purpose only, and that is to connect with other people in a way that we feel comfortable and familiar with. So I'll give you a fun example of them. Mirror neurons, like if you go, I see you've got that Baltimore Ravens, football there behind you. So you go to a Ravens game and you're standing there, and, you guys have a hard fought last second victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I know you guys hate them. And so, right, you're pumping your fist. So like all of a sudden you have 70,000 people who are largely strangers to each other, hugging each other, high-fiving each other. You walk out of the stadium and you pour out into the streets and bars, and somebody who you've never met comes up to you and screams and high-fives you, and you feel okay with that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mirror neurons. Okay, that's exactly what you have that common sameness, and the brain looks for that. That doesn't translate into Target, right? You don't go into Target and randomly go up and start high-fiving people and hugging them like you would at a grocery store.
They would arrest you, yeah.
They would arrest you, right? So, but the mirror neurons also work, in terms of relationships. So if you have people in your closest circle who are bringing you down, who, don't support your goals, who engage in habits you don't want to engage in. If you're trying to stop smoking and you're hanging out with people that are smoking, mirror neurons are saying, yeah, let's keep those cigarettes growing. So, what's starting to happen, and I think this will continue to happen, is that science is catching up to some of these ideas that we used to say were woo-woo, and now we're learning they're not. They're straight up legit. And so, I think that's another reason why people are embracing this stuff much more than they used to.
I love that. I mean, that's basically the average of the 5 people you hang out with. Like, I'm a big believer of that. You hang out with, I've said it a million times, you hang out with 5 losers, you'll be the 6th. But that's just like saying, go get a mentor. How important do you think mentorship is as far as getting out and getting that business coach, or getting that energy coach, or getting that life coach? They're all mentors essentially, but how important is that? And go ahead, and I know you have a program of your own that you have, a class, I think not a class, but a personal helping program. And why don't you go ahead and elaborate on that at the end?
Yeah, we do that. And I so here's the thing about that. If you're going to go and take on a new initiative, and whatever it is, maybe it's you want to get in better shape, or you want to be a better husband, or you want to be more successful in your job or whatever it is, you need to step outside of your own circle. And even if they're supportive, what I mean by that is the people in your life are the least likely to be honest with you when you're screwing up, or they're least likely to be harsh, so to speak. And so they will let you off the hook if you set a goal and you fail to achieve it. So if you're going to go after something, and this is something that Napoleon Hill talked about on Think and Grow Rich, and he talked about, being in masterminds. And Hal Elrod, who, I love Hal Elrod and The Miracle Morning. It's one of the most phenomenal books I think I've read in the last 20 years. He talks about accountability partners. And so you need somebody in your life who's going to call you out on your crap. You just have to have it. And so we do have a program that this is something that I developed with a number of behavioral science experts for a couple of years before we put this out into the world. And so we have a coaching program that we call Personal Helping. And it's heavily rooted in neuroscience. And that's important because you have to understand how you get into these habits and how you can leverage your brain to help you make new ones and go after your goals. So this is something that we offer, and we wanted it to be accessible for everybody. So whenever I go on shows, and I'm happy to extend this to your audience as well, we give some of these away every month as a thank you, as a showing of gratitude, to everybody who listens to our show. And so you can go to my website, which is thedailyhelping.com/contest. And then you can put in your name and email address. And if you're a lucky winner, we will send you a notification, and you'll either get a session of Personal Helping, or you'll get a coupon code to get a discount on future Personal Helping if you're interested in it.
Just so we can kind of drive home the point of how much value this is, like how much is it usually does that cost?
The Personal Helping is $150 a session.
So there you go, $150 a session. That's how much value you're giving to my listeners right now, and thank you so much for allowing my audience to participate in that. I think
sure.
I cannot stress enough how important mentorship is, and I think your podcast, why don't you go ahead and talk about that, because I just subscribed to it and I can't stop listening to it.
Well, I love that. I appreciate that. So the podcast is called The Daily Helping, and it's, as you mentioned at the top of the recording, food for the brain, knowledge from the experts, tools to win at life. So I am very excited about the guests that I bring on the show. We have real heavy hitters, and I really go after people's why. It's funny, the feedback I get is that I don't talk a lot when I'm on my show. And the reason is that I want my guest to really share their expertise. And then in terms of, how the brain works, when you connect with somebody emotionally and you hear their why, you're much more likely to remember their how and their what. And so that's why I think my show resonates with people, because that's kind of the format that I use. And that's an analogy that everybody can use in their personal lives. That is, when you're connecting with other people, really try and find out, why, what makes them tick, ask really good questions, find out how you can add value to them. And, that is a way to turn things to help you, because then people are going to be much more willing to promote you, to help you, to be there for you. But so the show is largely entrepreneurial, but not every episode is. We have top health experts, we have top money experts. So it's just different areas of wellness overall, and some people who have achieved remarkable success. But the common goal is that everybody who comes on is pretty humble and wants to share their knowledge with other people so that they can elevate themselves. I
just listened to the JJ Virgin episode, and that was epic. That was 100% epic. Kudos on that episode.
Thank you. That was a cool one for sure. She's really an amazing woman.
How do you get these heavy influencers on your show? I mean, I know that you have like over 80 episodes now, and you have a very large following, but it wasn't like that all the time, right?
No, I mean, when I started, I had nothing but a Hotmail address, and so I was up at 4:30 a.m. every day emailing people, when my show was just an idea. In fact, I didn't even end up naming the show what I was telling people it was called at the time. And so I would just reach out to them and say, hey, I'm Dr. Richard and I'm trying to do this thing. And most people just never replied. I'd say 70% never responded to me. And then, maybe 25% that did respond told me no, because like, who the hell are you? And and then, that 5% would say, okay. And then I'd get one person. Paul J. Zach was my first guest. And then I got another and another. And so you just start kind of building. And again, like, you offer, well, how can I help you? And in the beginning, that's really hard. And, for me, I was able to add value because of my clinical background. And so I was able to, for those that weren't clinical, I was able to, give them some advice and information. And I just never stopped hustling and just getting more and more. And I went to the events. I went to where these people were. So, like if you're thinking about having a podcast, you need to start going to events like Podfest Expo and Podcast Movement and, rub shoulders with these guys. And so eventually, I mean, now I'm very grateful for where we're at now. Most of my guests now come to me from PR agencies, and just saying, hey, my client's got a book coming out, and so can they come on your show? And the other thing that I always try and do is I'll ask, hey, so when's your book launch? And then I can't always accommodate, but I will try and move my schedule around to time their episode around the week of their book launch. And so again, it's that's a little thing, but it's another way of showing appreciation and giving value back. So, and the other thing that has helped me get the bigger guests is I've been in the media a lot. So I worked very hard to start creating relationships with journalists, and they interviewed me a lot, and so people know who I am that way. So there's no one way to skin a cat. I mean, I'm a big believer of the blue ocean strategy, and I'm not living it. I mean, I'm one, like you, like we're in the same personal development space, and there are a gazillion of us. But I also believe, and this is something that Tim Ferriss said in Tools of Titans, that podcasting is a very unique industry, and that it's not a zero-sum game. And that is, Trey, that if my listeners start listening to you, that doesn't take away from my audienceship. Like it's not like TV, pre-DVR. Like everybody can listen to everybody's show, and not every episode is going to always interest everybody. So, what I like about the podcasting space is that, one, it's still pretty new. And I mean, I think the industry in itself is still trying to figure things out together, and it's very collaborative. I find that when I talk to some of these, top podcasters like JLD, who you mentioned my episode with him, like there is a willingness amongst the people who, have the largest audiences from those that are just starting out to kind of help each other figure this out together, which is awesome.
No, I think the community of podcasters is everybody's so supportive of one another. Like I've met a couple of podcasters that their shows are a lot bigger than mine, yours especially, and you guys take the time to come on my show, and I appreciate that, and I'm very humbled by that, and I want to do whatever I can to promote your show and help you with whatever you're trying to get out there in the world, because I know that essentially we're all in this together as far as trying to get our brand out there, try to get our shows. To get followers and downloads and an audience is extremely hard. It's a slow process. It's not something that you're going to do, in 10 shows get like 100 million downloads. It's just not going to happen. You have to play the long game. And if your goal isn't aligned with what you're trying to do, then I don't think that you'll sustain in that industry. Like I know that I'm in the industry of trying to help people. Like I'm not just doing this to make money. Like I'm seriously, genuinely trying to create content that will help other people. And maybe this interview with you will spark something inside of them that will be like, you know what, Dr. Richard did that. I can do that. And then that's all I want to do. If it helps one person, then I am 100% okay with that.
The thing that's really cool is that we're never going to fully know the ripple effects, but we know they're out there. And, I've gotten emails from people. A girl in some village in India wrote me who, like Microsoft came down there and gave them these battery or crank kind of laptops. So they always have, for some reason, internet, and they always have electricity for their laptops. They didn't always have running water, but they always had that. And so, like, how crazy and humbling is it to get an email from somebody halfway around the world who says, you inspire me, and because of you, I think I can do X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say thank you for coming on the show. How can people connect with you, Dr. Richard?
Sure. So the mothership is thedailyhelping.com. That's where everything is. I do want to give a quick shout out, if I may, to something I'm really excited about. I've just launched a charity for children, and our goal is to help raise $2 million a year for children in this country to provide them time-limited speech, physical, and occupational therapy. So check that out as well. That's at everykidrocks.org, because we do believe that every kid has the potential to be amazing. But I'm the usual places: Facebook, Twitter, at The Daily Helping. And check us out. And if there's some information that helps you, then I'm grateful to be part of that change process for you.
I want to say thank you to Dr. Richard Shuster for coming on the show today and giving us some valuable content. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram at tdowns80 and on Twitter at downstray. You can email me at traydowns@superiorself.net or find me on my website, yoursuperiorself.com. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.